Here we're talking about elk and deer and pellet count. So one population estimation tool that we can use is how many plops of moose, elk, or deer they make in an area. So they defecate a certain amount per day. And so by knowing that, you can then estimate how many you have in your area. So we're going to do this for mule deer. I'm in a ponderosa pine habitat. It has a nice clearing in here. I've seen some sign of deer. And what you're going to want to do is lay out a transect that's 100 foot long. And along your transect, you're going to count every fresh pile of scat from a mule deer that occurs within 2.5 feet on either side of your transect. All right, so we're looking at a 5-foot swath. So we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to try and put this where you might be able to see them, the pellets, as we go. So we're just going to walk them, and I'll provide a handout for you that really shows the difference between mule deer, elk, and moose. Pretty difficult to tell mule deer from white-tailed deer, so you kind of have to just base it on habitat. But how they're using this landscape is really similar too, so it wouldn't really matter too much. Okay, so far I am not seeing any plops. We're just going to keep going here. Now, okay, here's one. So I'm going to get down kind of close to that. That's a pretty moist pile, and it is within my 2.5 feet. It's definitely mule deer, but it is shaped a bit like we tell you for elk. It's very dark though, and it's very small diameter, so I'm going to stick with mule deer on that. So I'm going to give one tally for my first transect with mule deer. And I'm trying to manage a data sheet at the same time that I record, so it's a little tricky. So let's keep going here. There's a cow plop, and we aren't really that concerned about him. Okay, here we go. Here's another plop. This one's a little covered up. It's definitely older, but because it's still dark, I'm going to count it for today's sake. This one's a bit questionable. It might be too old to count, but I'm going to count it. So we'll go with 2 there. And keep going here. Now, see this in here? We definitely have mule deer, but it's kind of just way smushed in and under the layer. It's definitely been here for quite some time. So I'm not going to count this one. It's just not fresh enough. And let me go. Whoops, it looks like I may have missed one here. Here's another pile that's pretty fresh, and it's right on the limit. I think it's still within 2.5 feet. So that would be 3 fresh piles for us. And then here's another pile. Again, getting kind of scattered. So let's not count that one. We will count this one, even though they're very similar, kind of averages out that way. So that's, if I'm counting correctly, 3 fresh plops, a couple that aren't fresh. All right, let's keep going. I want to show you some that are pretty old, but they blend in a bit more. Here we have some hoof action. Pretty big hoof, probably an elk actually. All right, here we have some really old. See how gray and speckled it is? There's a bunch scattered throughout here under my tape. I'm not going to count any of that. It's just all too old to be counted for the analysis. Keep going. Remember, we're looking at 2.5 feet on both sides of the transect. Okay, here we have another plop. This too looks a little too old, so I'm not going to count this one either. And here's one that's pretty dark. It's older. It's probably another borderline one. I am going to count this one. And then here's something interesting. Right here at the end, more scat, but notice the difference. This is very characteristic of elk. So you have some elk scat right here at the end. Elk tend to have what we call a nipple and a dimple. So a nipple on one end and a dimple on the other. Kind of like a little acorn. This is super old. So that finishes my first plot. What I would do then is I would move my plot over about 20 feet, do it again, move my plot over 20 feet, do it again, and one more time. So I would do it 4 times for a length of 100 feet, measuring 2.5 feet on each side of the transect with every one. Okay, while we're at it, here is some moose poop. You can see it's much larger, much rounder, kind of shaped like a football with points on each end. So in this one small space, we've gotten all 3 primary ungulates.